The research methodology used during this documentary are academic literature and videos on both the crisis industry-based research and crisis management theories and models. We've investigated whether they have sufficient plans in place according to both the crisis management model and the Six Sigma model.
Thank you so much.
This was once the scene of thousands of happy fans at Ariana Grande's Dangerous Woman tour. Whoever thought that something like this could turn into one of the worst situations Manchester has faced in years?
Oh my god.
It's a bomb! Panic and pandemonium.
On the 22nd of May 2017, 22-year-old Salman Abedi from Manchester detonated an improvised explosive device in the Manchester Arena, resulting in 23 deaths, including himself. This was the deadliest terror attack on the UK soil since 2005's London bombings. More than 800 people received physical or psychological injuries in the blast of the Ariana Grande concert. In Grande's statement, she said, "You hear about these things you see on the news. You tweet the hashtag, it's happened before and it'll happen again. You think about it for a little bit and then people move on. But experience something like this firsthand, you think of everything differently." The bombers' actions prior to the event. A close friend of Salman, who was also serving a jail sentence for terrorism, said that Salman had previously made comments and threats which his family and friends thought was a joke. The comments that were made were that he wanted to launch a terrorist attack on a public space, but none of them took him seriously. It was also brought to the attention during a public inquiry that Salman Abedi beat up a female student at Manchester College after confronting her about why she was wearing a short skirt. Police asked him to undertake an anger management course, which he told them he was being provided with by the college, but never took place. Other students have since commented that he was very disrespectful and he had a very real problem with women. Mr. Keelan had earlier told the inquiry that he'd been off duty when he returned home and saw events unfold on TV. He received phone calls and messages of colleagues but ignored these and went to bed. He said that in essence only Chief Officer Peter O'Reilly, who was on rota in a leadership role, could take action. His suspension came after a new report concluded Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Services remain unprepared to respond effectively to a terrorist attack 4 years after the arena bombing. The first police officer on scene, Jessica Barlow, arrived at the fire at the arena less than 2 minutes after the blast. The statement read, "I can only describe it as a war zone. There was a number of bodies on the floor and blood everywhere. Finding nuts and bolts scattered across the scene, repeated requests are made for ambulances and as many resources as possible." 24 minutes later, a radio message to control from another officer was heard with him saying, "Where's our ambulances, please?" The control replied, "We don't know. We're calling them again." The father and second brother of Salman Abedi were arrested by counter-terrorism police in separate raids. Britain raised its terror threat level from severe to critical, meaning they thought an attack may be imminent. With this, nearly 1,000 soldiers were deployed on the 24th of May to guard key sites including Buckingham Palace, Downing Street and the Palace of Westminster. The brother of the bomber was jailed for helping him create the explosive devices used within the attack, and was jailed for a minimum of 55 years for mass murder. Not long after the attack, it was discovered that FBI were monitoring Salman Abedi but were unable to track his movements once he left Libya. Sources in the US explained how the 22-year-old university dropout was known to the FBI after they detected that he was going a little crazy. Security had already noticed the man and was suspicious of him and the weight of his backpack that night, with one security guard reporting that the bomber had been standing around the exits of the stadium for over an hour. Security guard Kyle Lawler told Inquiry that he sensed that there was something wrong due to his slightly nervous reaction when people looked at him, and said that he seemed very fidgety, but he also stated how he wasn't sure what to do, and that although the national terror threat level was at severe, he knew nothing of any potential attack, and was fearful of being branded a racist and would be in trouble if he got it wrong. British Transport Police had deployed officers to police the Ariana Grande concert, where they were briefed to stagger their breaks during the concert and to have concluded them by 9 o'clock, in order to keep all areas covered and ensure safety. This instruction was ignored by the officers present in the Victoria Exchange complex, leaving the area unattended whilst the bomber left the city room at 9:10 and made his way via the station concourse to the tram platform, where he waited there for a short period before making his way back to the city room and re-entering at 21:33. Christopher Wilde, member of the public, thought that the bomber appeared to be out of place. He was the only person to act upon it. The bomber was noticed by the members of the public, which supports the conclusion that a vigilant officer would have identified him as suspicious had they seen him. The CCTV images have emerged, claiming to show suicide bomber Salman Abedi also buying a rucksack in which he used that night. The pictures show the terrorist shopping in the city's Arndale Centre on Friday around 8 p.m, 3 days before he used the bag to conceal his bomb, which wasn't flagged up due to him no longer being a subject of interest.
That in the 42 seconds you were with Mohammed Agha, you did communicate all of those things?
Yes, I think so, yes.
How did Mr. Agha respond?
He said he already knew about him. And that was about it, really.
The youngest affected in the bombing was 8-year-old Safi. Sergeant Mark Haviland knew that he had no choice but to carry Safi Rose out onto the street because paramedics would not be coming to them in time. Safi had been in the city room foyer where the bomb had gone off for 25 minutes before she was carried out to find an ambulance, and it was 52 minutes before she reached the hospital. The inquiry revealed that Safi had lived for an hour and that she died as a result of blood loss from leg injuries which were never treated to. Her mum Lisa lay on the floor of the arena foyer, unable to move nearby, while Safi's dad Andrew spent all night searching for the mum and Safi. He travelled to 3 hospitals to only find out the next day that Safi had died. Manchester terror attack victim Josie was also left to save her own life before emergency services showed up. She was bleeding badly when a piece of shrapnel hit her leg just a millimetre away from a main artery. Josie broke her handbag strap and tied it around her bleeding leg until emergency services could reach her in order to save her life. Here are the parents of another victim, Martin Hett.
I'm Paul Hett, the father of Martin Hett. On the 22nd of May 2017, our wonderful son Martin lost his life in the Manchester Arena attack, and our lives were torn apart. We were heartbroken to think Martin was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Today, our heartbreak turns to anger. We entrusted the safety of our loved ones into organisations and agencies who had a duty of care to protect them. This inquiry has rightly found that we were failed on every level. This terrorist atrocity could and should have been prevented, and 22 innocent people should not have lost their lives.
4 years after the suicide bombing in Manchester Arena, it is confirmed that stewards still undergo e-learning on their mobile phones despite the inquiry into the 2017 bombing recommended that this method was unlikely to provide adequate training, said Chairman Sir John Saunders. The company axed 150 of its 3,000 part-time stewards and security staff for failing to complete the course within a specific time frame. Actions that need to be considered and how it could have been prevented. Firstly, in addition to strategic planning, the maintenance of surgical skills needed to be addressed. Unlike military surgeons who train for the planning and surgical management of mass battlefield casualties, those in civilian practice have little or no experience of managing such patients. Secondly, through this tragic event, it has been made clear how important patient identification actually is. Failure to correctly identify patients can result in a serious risk to the patient's safety, as they cannot find the family they have come from. And thirdly, SHOSEC, who provided the security for the event, should have followed up the online training with practical person-to-person training to check that the online training had been understood fully.
With Salman Abedi, he was frequently travelling to Libya. Both MI5 and CTP, counter-terrorism police, had received information about that, and therefore, given that was known and that the powers are there, that actually monitoring and having alerts about his travel arrangements would have been a good idea, and they've acknowledged that that's something to be done. I can't go into detail, but I think they are actively looking at how they monitor both active and closed subjects of interest.
Different decisions could have prevented the bombing, according to relatives, as they say they believed that there had been significant failings by MI5 that needed to be addressed. First, there needs to be a concerted effort to enhance MI5 and the police's ability to use data to detect activity of concern, test new approaches, and share info and analysis of data. Second, MI5 should share its intelligence more widely and work with partners such as local authorities on how best to manage the risk posed by closed subjects of interest in particular. And third, there should be a new approach to managing domestic extremism groups. Since the horrific incident, many people and organisations have put measures and services in place to ensure ongoing support for all affected by the bombing. The first service available is the Swan Bereavement Model, which has been created to support the families of those individuals who were killed as a result of the bombing. All families of the deceased were supported by the team for the first 72 hours until they were then assigned a named bereavement nurse and had access to a 24/7 dedicated helpline. Victims' families were also given a day out at Disneyland to compensate in a small way towards the loss they faced during the Grande Tour. Families were accompanied by comedian John Shippen, Michelle Keegan and Mark Wright. Following on from the attack 4 years later, on the 3rd of April 2022, Man City have also organised a football match between celebrities and football players to raise money for the charity set up by the victims' families. Looking at all the information available, it seems that they have not followed either model efficiently. The evidence shows how, following the incident, the services involved have failed to define, measure, or undertake many measures to ensure complete safety and success of the concert. Their readiness was at its lowest, with the MI5 no longer keeping Salman under surveillance despite his background and previous associations with other SOIs. The response to security and emergency services around this event did not appear to be controlled, planned or communicated well enough during or after the incident, with security unable to manage their time correctly and follow the instructions they were given, and services failing to turn up. Lastly, the recovery from the incident has not been planned, managed and corrected, with training still undergoing via their phones, and chief fireman being suspended due to little effort to ensure measures were taking place moving forward. As previously discussed, their behaviours throughout the bombing were not of those who are planned and ready for a serious crisis. It is clear from the research and information provided that not only have they failed to follow crisis models throughout or before the event, ensuring the safety of individuals during the attack, but have also failed to plan, strategize, and learn from their mistakes moving forward. Looking at the structural functional theory in crisis management, institutions that function together are able to ensure a smoother operation with little risk. Organisational communication relies on a structure made up of networks for information to flow and a hierarchy of people who manage the process. But as we have seen throughout the documentary, the MI5 failed to communicate with other organisational groups about their information on Salman Abedi, which created no alert for other countries he may be visiting. In this case, it was England. Although the contingency theory asserts there is no single best method to organise or lead a company, and that decisions should be made contingent on circumstances, as each situation is different with a different threat level, it was still important that the security that night stuck to their basic briefing and acted on the situation accordingly. Throughout large events, all crisis leaders and other communications should take into account a range of external factors such as threats, environment, social and political support, and the complexity of the issue.